lot of things in life are not within the controls of mankind. Nobody, for instance, can determine when the sun rises or when it should set. But then you have control over when you rise and what you do when you rise. And here we have chosen to rise early and exchange values with you and with every other person in the world. That is how I say welcome to Early Exchange this morning on Souk News. My name is Ayo Jimmy, and I am not alone as always. Blessing, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ayo. Thank you for joining us again. We do hope you enjoyed yesterday's edition of the show. You are now smarter and well equipped for the job market. We learned something yesterday, that desire is nothing and decision is something, but determination is everything. So what are you determined to do today? You must be determined to make some profit in every aspect of your life. Thank you for joining us. And before we move on to today's package, which centers around cybersecurity and of course gadget security. How do you protect your gadget? What can happen if you were not careful with the usage of your gadget and you're not proactive in ensuring that all you do with it is secure? This and more will be the focus of today's show. Let's join Olaoluwa Aware, who is waiting to update you on happenings around the globe. Good morning, Ola.
Yes, good morning, Blessing Aiche. Good morning, Ayo Jimmy, and good morning to you watching. Welcome to the morning news update from Souk News. My name is Olaoluwa Awe. From government shake-ups and economic shifts to diplomatic discussions and Hollywood negotiations, stay ahead of the rest with a glimpse into today's world on the morning news update. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has given his assurance to the people of Nigeria that there will be no further increase in the price of petrol despite the recent deregulation of the product. The president's spokesperson, Ajurin Galale, made this announcement after a closed-door meeting with the president in Abuja. Ajuri stressed that the president is committed to maintaining the current pump price of petrol across the country.
Mr. President wishes to assure Nigerians, following the announcement by the NNPC Limited just yesterday, that there will be no increase in the pump price of petroleum motor spirit anywhere in the country. We repeat, the President affirms that there will be no increase in the pump price of petroleum motor spirit.
Yes, President Tinubu also acknowledged the existing inefficiencies in the downstream sector that have contributed to the fuel price controversy and promised that these issues would be swiftly addressed in order to ensure a smooth delivery of petroleum products and maintain current prices. He also reaffirmed the government's commitment to the deregulation policy in the petroleum industry. Now, away from that, the federal government has disbanded the Advertising Standard Panel, ASP, after it approved controversial billboards that it took as an attempt to influence the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal because the billboards had the title, "All Eyes on the Judiciary." The Director General of the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, Arkan Dr. Olalekan Fadolapo, announced that they have also suspended the director and deputy director responsible for regulations to investigate the matter. Fadolapo explained that some ads were approved by mistake, going against the vetting guidelines. The ASP is responsible for ensuring ads follow the country's laws and ethical advertising practices. Now, the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, has recorded an increase in the number of approved phones for sale in the country, reaching 2,155 in July 2023. Expressing the importance of regulatory approval, Professor Umar Dambata, the Executive Vice Chairman of NCC, stressed the necessity for consumers to only buy the certified phones. These devices, covering various brands and models, have undergone testing by the telecoms regulator to ensure they meet the requisite type approval standards necessary for consumer sales within the country. The latest data reveals a continued dominance of Chinese mobile manufacturers in the Nigerian market, particularly under the Transsion Group umbrella encompassing brands like Tecno, Infinix, and Itel. This conglomerate holds the distinction of having 545 of its phone models, amounting to 25% of the approved phones available for sale in Nigeria. And the Nigerian Ports Authority, NPA, has introduced a new policy through the Trucks Transit Parks, TTP, requiring truck drivers to pay a mandatory 50 Naira stamp duty on every 1,000 Naira receipt issued to them. The notice dated August 14th indicated that this directive would take effect from September 2023. The TTP management stated that the NPA had instructed them to implement the directive, which aligns with a policy issued by the Federal Ministry of Finance 2 years ago. This policy requires all government agencies, including the NPA, to stamp receipts of 1,000 Naira and above with a 50 Naira stamp produced by the Nigerian Postal Service. As a result of this directive, all bookings made on the ETO platform for stakeholders in the port environment doing business with TTP will now include an additional charge of 50 Naira. The notice further informed stakeholders that the implementation of this directive by the TTP would start on September 1st, 2023. All marketers in Nigeria have highlighted a rising concern over the foreign exchange crisis and the recent introduction of a 7.5% value-added tax VAT on automotive gas oil called diesel, saying this has driven up the cost of diesel to between 900 Naira and 950 Naira per litre in several states. This increase has the potential to impact local manufacturers. Representatives of the Natural Oil and Gas Suppliers Association of Nigeria, NUGASA, shared their perspective during a press conference in Abuja. They revealed that their inability to access US dollars for importing diesel has hindered their operations. Prior to the introduction of the VAT, diesel was priced around 650 Naira per litre. The implementation of the 7.5% VAT on diesel was reported in June 2023. Both the Nigeria Customs Service and the Federal Inland Revenue Service confirmed that diesel was not exempt from this tax. NUGASA's president, Bennett Corey, urged government intervention and suggested that stakeholders, including bank CEOs and the Central Bank of Nigeria, should collaborate to address the dollar scarcity issue to prevent further economic disruptions, while President Bola Tinubu should focus on revitalizing Nigeria's refineries. Now we'll go on a break. When we come back, we'll move away from Nigeria and talk about updates from other parts of the world. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the morning news update. Now let's touch on some countries in Africa. Uganda's central bank has implemented its first main lending rate cut in over 2 years, with the goal of stimulating economic growth following a more rapid decline in inflation than anticipated. Bank of Uganda Deputy Governor Michael Atingiego noted that the central bank rate, CBR, was reduced from 10% to 9.5% in response to a year-on-year inflation drop to 3.9% in July, down from 10.4% in January and beneath the bank's 5% target. Despite Uganda's relatively favorable economic performance compared to other African nations amid tightening global financial conditions, the central bank acknowledged a slowdown in growth, partly attributed to weakened demand. The chief economist for Africa and the Middle East at Standard Chartered, Razia Khan, noted that the Bank of Uganda tends to act proactively on rate changes, giving it more flexibility to ease when suitable conditions arise. And now to Kenya. Kenya has taken a reversal in government policy by reintroducing a modest subsidy to stabilize retail fuel prices for the upcoming 30 days. This change in approach stems from public discontent regarding the high cost of living, prompting President William Ruto to reinstate the subsidy that was initially removed when he assumed office in September of the previous year. Upon taking office, President Ruto discontinued fuel and maize flour subsidies that had been established by his predecessor, highlighting a preference for subsidizing production over consumption. The energy regulator unveiled that the maximum retail price per litre of petrol would remain fixed at 194.68 Kenyan shillings, which is approximately 1,021.81 naira, sparing consumers from a 7.33 shilling increase that the government will absorb through a price stabilization fund. And away from that, Mali's military leader Assimi Goïta has had a conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss the post-coup situation in Niger, where democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum was ousted on July 26. Putin stressed the importance of peaceful resolution for stability in the Sahel region. The discussion, initiated by Mali, centered on the Sahel's current dynamics and highlighted the need to address the Niger situation through peaceful diplomatic means, as underscored in the Kremlin's statement. Niger's strategic significance due to its uranium and oil resources and its role in hosting foreign forces combating regional armed groups has attracted attention from global powers like the United States, China, Europe, and Russia. And moving away from Africa, in the UAE, the registration process for potential members of the electoral bodies to stand for nomination in the 2023 Federal National Council (FNC) commenced. This pivotal step in the electoral journey is set to unfold until Friday, August 18. Assurances of preparedness have been provided by the UAE committees operating under the aegis of the National Election Committee. These committees have affirmed the readiness of the registration centers where aspirants from electoral bodies can submit their nominations and engage in this crucial democratic endeavor. The candidate registration process, open round-the-clock electronically and in person at designated centers, will be followed by thorough verification by the National Election Committee to ensure compliance with prerequisites and constitutional criteria. And candidates with prior participation are also eligible based on consistent acceptance criteria. Moving on, Russia's central bank has taken an emergency step by raising its key interest rate by 350 basis points to 12%, aiming to counteract the recent decline of the ruble following the Kremlin's call for stricter monetary policy. The decision came as the ruble dipped below 100 against the US dollar, largely impacted by Western sanctions and increased military expenditures. Although the ruble regained some ground post-decision, concerns persisted due to geopolitical tensions related to Russia's actions in Ukraine. The central bank's move was prompted in part by Russian President Vladimir Putin's economic advisor, Maxim Oreshkin's criticism of the bank's soft monetary policy, attributing it to the ruble's weakening. Inflationary pressures and rising inflation expectations prompted the bank's decision to raise rates, particularly to curb potential price stability risks and the pass-through of ruble depreciation to consumer prices. And now to the U.S. Hollywood studios have presented a new proposal to striking screenwriters aiming to address key concerns related to artificial intelligence and viewer data access. The Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers have agreed to maintain human screenwriting credits instead of substituting them with artificial intelligence. Additionally, the studio are willing to share data on streaming service viewing hours. This offer also includes a more than 20% increase in residual payments for writers when their shows are aired on networks other than the original ones. The involvement of influential figures like Netflix's co-chief executive officer Ted Sarandos and Walt Disney Co.'s CEO Bob Iger indicates efforts to negotiate with the writers. The Writers' Union has received a counter-proposal from the studios, signaling progress in the strike that began over 100 days ago. The strike emerged from dispute over compensation, staffing, and residual payments amidst the rise of streaming platforms. And that's the morning news update. I am Olaoluwa Awe. Thank you for watching. Make sure you stay tuned for more updates and engaging discussions on the early exchange with Ayo Jimmy and Blessing AJ. Have a nice day.
Quite interesting news there. Thank you very much, Ola, for updating us. We'll begin this morning with the issue on petrol price increase in the pump price of petrol, which the president has given assurance that there will be no more increase. But before I move any further, let me introduce to you once again Idausa Osama, who's Director, Research and Policy, Africa Development Studies Center, ADS. So good morning, sir. Good to see you in blue.
Blessing, good morning. Good morning.
You look bright.
I just hope the blue you are wearing is not because of a particular club. Good welcome on board. Really.
All right. When it comes to petrol, Nigerians want to know what is the latest. Is there going to be some increase in the pump price or not? But this time around, the president has given some assurance that there will be no further increase in the price of petrol and the pump price of petrol. But that seems rather contradictory because after the removal of subsidy, we were told that market forces will be allowed to determine the price. So if the government is giving assurance that there will be no further increase, how are they going to achieve that? Is there going to be some form of subsidy to that effect? What's going to happen?
I think for me, I don't want to attribute this to the president. Somehow, the presidential aides had to be very careful the way they engage with the public. Because the issues that we're dealing with in Nigeria, and this coming from successive regime, are issues that has to do with trust, where government cannot keep its word. Every policy has a life cycle. You know, you have to start a policy, and there's a gestation period that you are expecting, that some certain things have to be put in place for the policy to realize its full potential in terms of its implementation. Now, before a jury will go on air to tell us that the president has assured us that pump price is not increasing, he should be able to tell us what are the mechanisms that are in place. Because it will be one thing to make promises to Nigeria, because people are going to hold you accountable because of what you say to them. People are getting used and adjusted to the reality of the market. So you don't come with a hope. When are we start to producing or refining our own petrol at home, so that the skyrocketing price of dollar will not affect imports and will not change the pump price? That has to be put in place. Are Nigerian refineries now in shape to produce what we consume, to give us the assurance that, of course, there is not going to be pump price increase? I think what those who communicate government policy should be doing at the moment is to assure Nigeria that these increases are temporary. Based on what government is putting in place, SYZ, at this point in time, at this time in the future, we're going to expect that something substantial is going to happen. And SYZ will leave the pricing, and then we can have a stable pricing of petrol.
Okay, while your point is noted, you are assuming that there is a disconnect between what the president intends and what a jury came out to say. But the president has not debunked this, at least not yet, really. This is not just anybody in the president. He is the president's spokesperson. Exactly. Of course, in the past, spokesperson have actually come out to say some things, and the president said, no, I didn't mean it that way. If that is the premise upon which your argument is based, then I believe it. Now,
I'm not saying they should believe it. It's a policy trust of government.
You just said that spokespersons should be assuring Nigerians that it's just for a while. Yeah. But what if this message came from the presidency, which it's meant to be in the first place? Of course, I have issues with this, because if we said that we should allow market forces, like you said, to dominate, are we now bringing back subsidy like Kenya were introduced? I mean, or are we handholding the forces of demand and supply? Yeah. Those are the questions for me now. It is not in our place, I think, for us to question what the man has said until the presidency says, no, I did not say that.
You see, even if this is coming from the president, and I think what our role here as the fourth estate in the realm is to actually ensure that we find some level of decorum in society.
Yes.
This is the issue. You see, because people are going to hold you by your word. that you're speaking. Now, if you're going to make a promise, ensure that the promise that you are giving to Nigeria, because you have assured us there's no subsidy. So don't smuggle it in from the behind, because it will erode the confidence and the trust that the people are already building on the government. Now, yes, of course, we understand that, of course, there will be a need for the tightening of belts somehow, such that if we deal with this issue frontally, which is, of course, we have to cut down on our imports, which put pressures on our forests. We have to be able to build our refineries and increase the capacity for local refining. The pump price of petrol will naturally go down. But now those competencies are not in place. So to make a promise that there's not going to be further increment, when there is already increment, because you go to the pump prices, NNPC came up with a statement yesterday that from their own end and in their mega station, they will still sell at the old rate. But the filling stations that are not NNPC, they already
the independent
increased,
marketers.
Yes, of course, they have already increased their prices with reference to the market rate. Now, if you read the snippets of news this morning, the president is even thinking of selling about 20% of the stake in some of critical assets in Nigeria, which include NNPC. Yes. Now, if that stake is sold, that goes to the private sector, so which means government will not have any control share in the stake in NNPC. So you can't determine and fix price for them. So if they have to operate profitably, I think the government must be careful the way it relate and communicate with citizens. They should be able to carry us along so that we know the level of suffering we will need to endure and for how long. And then that will make it very easy to manage, rather than making promises that tomorrow you will be looking for press statement to correct, and that will not be just good
I think I share your point there, but you probably are feeling the pain even more than the presidency itself, yes. Really. Well, maybe as a consensus, as a media expert, yeah, you are right to do that. But then, Ajuri even explained that they are trying to fix the inefficiencies in the downstream sector, which is a technical statement anyway that an average Nigerian cannot really relate to. But then it's just a matter of time. We'll get to see whether they can, keep this promise. It's a very, very serious promise, and
yes,
Nigerians
it's a
will
promise
come back
on which plans will be made.
Honestly speaking,
because
no, I don't think we need promises now. All we need from the president is to see some actions, and I think, of course, some eminent Nigerians are speaking to these core issues. Number one, can we see the president taking some very decisive action, like in areas where, of course, we have seen inefficiency in this place and people are scapegoats?
In the downstream sector?
Yes, of course, in the petroleum sector. We know that there is so much corruption. There is so a lot that, of course, the forensic auditing that is going on in CBN, we need to see what outcome is coming out from there. Not for too long. Let Nigerians see that the president is taking some very critical steps in dealing with the issue, which is the inefficiency, the malfeasance, the corrupt nature of the public service, so that we can see that government is sincere. And then you come to equity with a very clean hands.
Okay. We'll wait to see all of that happen as we move to another matter now. The federal government has disbanded the Advertising Standard Panel, ASP, after it approved controversial billboards that it took as attempts to influence the presidential election petition tribunal, because the billboard had the title "All Eyes on the Judiciary." Ayo, what's your take on that?
Advertising is a loaded gun. You can either kill a bird with it or you kill yourself with it, depending on how you handle it. And if you have ever worked in an advertising sector in any capacity before, especially as a copywriter, you do know that words matter. The world was formed from words, and the word became flesh and came to man. That's another thing entirely. Now, the idea, see, what you intend is not as important as what the public interprets it to mean. And, we have a responsibility as advertisers or as media people to ensure that we don't misguide the populace and we don't incite them. And we can easily do this with our words. Now, why this hammer is so strong is that this is a body meant to regulate. It is called Advertising Standard Panel. It's as good as SON or NAFDA coming out with a product that is contaminated. That is why this penalty is a bit heavy. But then I have issues with it. Will this be the first time it is happening? If yes, what was the action taken?
But the DG has admitted that some hours were approved by mistake.
You see, we must be very careful what we do.
Yes.
Because the level of lawlessness in Nigeria is getting to the rooftop. Mm-hmm. You see, what's advertising? What's advertising? You are selling an idea to the public.
Definitely.
Now, what idea is in the judgment? And every lawyer knows this, that when the case is pending in court, you don't interfere with it. Otherwise, it becomes sub judice. And I think the person who put on that advert even should be tried for treason. Oh, yes. Because it's treasonable for you to be interfering with the judiciary process. That's what it means. You are trying to goad the judiciary and put them in the court of public opinion. I think that is the height of irresponsibility. And I think if the agents that are putting those things on the billboard they have found, they should actually be charged for treason.
The DG of ARCON, which is the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, admitted that some ads were approved by mistake.
There are errors, but some professions have a very very low tolerance, for errors. One of them is advertising, because you shape people's opinion. Yeah, if Akron DG is saying there are errors in some ads, it's still a slap on the face of the
that is it. He should lose his job immediately.
It's a slap. You can't come out and admit that there are mistakes. Do you know the vetting processes before an ad comes out? Junior writers, copywriters will work on it. It goes on to the creative director, and from there to another level. And there is something called pulsing in advertising, where you expose to people in-house and they critique. Are you telling me that this ad went through all these stages and you still pushed errors out to the market? No, that's a no for me, really. It's a no.
And I think he should be ashamed of himself.
Well, I
to
think
come to the public space to say that, look, how can you admit such terrible mistake?
I think
you see, there are a lot of issues that we must understand in the way government will work. Even on TV here, we can't talk about those cases that are in court because they're against the law. So that we don't sway the opinion of the judges for miscarriage of justice. It's important because they say judiciary is the last hope of the common man.
Yes.
And this is just because we have a culture in our environment where we cannot manage defeats. And I think that is becoming something that we need to be talking to ourselves. It's not just only on advertising, because it's been on social media for a very long time. With all false stories, fake stories, just to change the opinion and the decision, and frighten and gag the judiciary. So for me, really, I think the state should be out for these people and find a way to get them out and use them as an example so that we can have some decorum in society.
And if indeed it was a case of incompetence, then ACON needs to do so much more. They should look beyond just asking people to come and vet adverts just for monetary part of it. If this is a true case of incompetence as against treasonable intention, then ACON has a lot to do and train and retrain its members otherwise.
Anyway, the director and deputy director responsible for regulations they were suspended the director and deputy director responsible for regulations to investigate the matter. So we'll leave it there and wait for further investigations as that is ongoing. So now let's turn to transportation, as the management of the Nadu Railway Corporation has announced the suspension of the Warri-Takwa train services as a result of a derailment at the Ajaokuta station on Monday. It's learned that, according to reports, it resumed operations on Monday after the suspension of train services on the corridor when 148 passengers and 38 crew members were on board. So suspending operations now on that route. You're someone who uses train services sometimes to connect to some parts of Nigeria. And we know that at this time where there is an increase in the pump price of petrol, for routes that have train services, Nigerians have turned to that. So for the Warri Itakpe train service being suspended, what's your take?
I am not going to focus so much on the suspension. If the train derailed and they say they are suspending, operations, it's only normal so they can fix the errors there. But I will speak more to the inefficiency that I have observed there in the NRC operation. The idea of rail travel is very, very important. We like it and we clap for them when it came. But then there is one gross inefficiency. Up till today, you cannot book for a train ride online. You still have to go physically to the train station, and they won't even accept transfer. You can't pay by POS. You need to know what we went through during the cash crunch. You could not go there and pay with your card. No, you must bring raw cash. Meanwhile, outside, people were there selling currency to us. You buy from outsiders, and you go in there to pay. That is one. Of recent, because of the rising cost of fuel, okay, more people are patronizing the train services.
Yes.
Now you buy tickets for maybe a Lagos to Ibadan ride, and they would have sold fully in Ibadan. As you're from Ibadan, if you were in Abeokuta, for instance, they would have outsold all the spaces to people from Ibadan, passengers from Ibadan. So when they get to Abeokuta and you are joining, you are still paying the same price for sitting, yet you are standing. We are now standing. Standing passengers have outweighed the sitting passengers in the train.
So it's beginning to look like the
And I told them, I will probably do a study one day. I didn't know that this will come out. So this speaks to a building tempo of inefficiencies, and that is where I would like us to look at.
Well, I don't see people standing on the train as something that is
but why are we paying the same fee?
I came back from Paris about 2 days ago, and then, of course, I also use your train services. You'll see it's worse off than our Molo, as the case may be. So it's not only here. In the UAE, it's also a lot of people are in there because, especially during rush hour, you see that there's passenger. But my real main concern is the fact that, which is a bigger problem we have as a country, is that, other people are having problem. Our own problem as a nation is very peculiar. You have people demand, supply is its trouble. In other claims, they have supply. They don't have demand.
They have demand.
And this really, for me, speaks to the core issues that faces us as a nation. But I think it's not just enough to tell us that we are suspending a train service.
Well, it was suspended for yesterday.
So for how long is it going to be suspended?
We don't know how long it's going to be suspended.
Yes, of course. I think those are the communications that should come. You see, I say to people, I was listening to Professor Falola the other day, and he talks about the failure of modernity. Now, anywhere we go today in the world, there's anger somehow. Because people are unnecessarily angry. And so if people are angry unnecessarily, and you want to appeal to such people, you must be able to develop a template of communication that appeal to that kind of a people. So when you are going to write a statement or a press release, wherever you are in the corporate communication of any institution or organization of government, at least write it such a way that you will be able to appease the anger of the public. What you need to tell us is, yes, we had an incident. This will be fixed in 24 hours, in 48 hours, and operation will resume. And I think that will do.
Yes, proper communication is necessary. And I think also that we should be able to move with the trend. If we have for private transport owners using POS and even accepting transfers, then why can't the NRC have that kind of structure that you have different payment options for people?
They could even learn from Lagos. Lagos is using cowrie. And that goes for train, that goes for lag ride, that goes for BRT. You
Give
just
people
have unlock your
options.
card, and then of course you can even monitor your revenue.
Okay.
But then there are a lot of interest, of course. in
A
Nigerian
lot,
people.
you can say that.
Some
And
people
for,
don't just
and for
notice
those
one.
who will stand while boarding the train, I don't think the fare should be the same, because for someone sitting and someone standing, the person standing is a lot inconvenience. So the fare charge should not be the same at all. I don't know if the fare charge in Paris is the same for
It's the
those who
same.
stand.
It's the same. But
But we don't have to copy
so
everything.
copy
like
the
a
inefficiencies
sinker.
as well, right?
No, we don't need
Must
to
we
copy
adopt it
that.
like
We
that?
don't need to copy
You
that.
know, because what it is because the train service is discounted massively. And of course, is given that, of course, if you are going to travel a certain kilometer and you're going to use train, you're going to join train to get to your destination. You may use 1, 2, 3, or 4 before you get to your bus stop. Of course, the fare is given. If it's €5, it's €5. If it's €9, it's €9. And that is when it's going to be taken. So that is basic and standard.
Okay, we should copy the good things and know how to implement them, not just copy everything, whether good or bad. We'll take a break from this now, return to begin to look at security in the cyberspace. Stay tuned.
Oh, that's it.
The online world is one that accommodates people with different motivations, unto good or unto evil, while some deploy the possibility of the internet to sharpen skills and be of service to humanity. Some use it for undercover activities like identity theft, hacking, gaining unauthorized access to people's information, and exploiting such to defraud unsuspecting relatives, colleagues, or neighbors of their victims.
2 years ago, there was a link that was sent to me on my messenger. So I mistakenly clicked on that link and my account was captured. So that was how it got hacked, and they were sending messages to my friends, and I got to know that my account has been hacked.
The consequences are far-reaching, as financial losses, reputational damage, and emotional distress are part of the resulting bag of pains.
I received an email. Somebody was trying to hack my account, but I don't know, my husband had to sort it out, so I don't know how he did it.
These are obvious challenges on the digital landscape, and combating these becomes an anonymous goal. Unfortunately, the borderless nature of the internet makes it difficult to track and apprehend hackers across jurisdictions. Individuals must be aware of the huge risks and should be educated on the importance of not sharing their details recklessly, using stronger passwords, and regular updates on cybersecurity.
Since I work in the bank, we are mandated to update our password every month, so it has become like a personal thing. Even on my other accounts that are not related to the bank, I still try to update and use symbols and mix uppercase with lowercase, the regular stuff.
If you look at the scammers all over the place, we don't feel safe. So giving up all your information online, I feel risky, I don't feel secure at all.
In addressing identity theft and hacking, governments, organizations, and experts are enjoined to adopt robust security strategies, including encryption, multi-factor authentication, regular audits to identify and rectify vulnerables. The threat is real and the damages are deep, even as governments, private organizations, technological experts advocate a renewed vigor to develop cybersecurity consciousness in an online world where dogs eat dogs and man kills man. Frederick Otueze, Souk News.
At the dawn of civilization, you become a citizen either by birth, by naturalization, or by marriage. But then there is this citizenship by the internet. When you are on the internet and you play your game there, you socialize there, you make friends there, you are called a netizen. All of us, or let me just assume that a lot of us are netizens. And by that identification, we are prone to attacks as well. The issue of security threats or identity theft online is real. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, it is being said that the economic cost of cybercrime in this year alone is 127 billion naira. That is huge. That is some people's money going into the wrong hands. People have their identities stolen and used for something sinister to dupe people and defraud them. And so, we are looking at identity thefts in the online world today. And to do that with us, we have our guest in the house. Well, Blessing, maybe your first take before we introduce the guest.
Well, it is quite shocking to know how much cyber crime is costing Nigeria. You know, when the Yahoo thing started picking momentum, so some Nigerians were happy about it, maybe because they had relatives who were involved in it, and then the proceeds, they were getting from the proceeds, and they would point houses to you, oh, look at development coming. But little did they know that it was also stealing from them, because you don't have all the people involved in cybercrime as your relative. So all the proceeds does not come to you. And it's also quite sad to note that the cost of cybercrime is 0.08% of our GDP. But before we begin to read our statistics and tell you how much it costs, let's introduce to you our guest, who will be talking about identity, security, and theft. How do you secure your identity from theft? And if it does happen, what are the things to do? And so we have Oluseyi Akindele, who is CTO Digital and Code. Good morning, welcome to the show.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
All right, Mr. Akindele, let me start on a very personal level. Is it a mark of humility that all of you in tech are always in simple, attires? Well, is it when you see Mark Zuckerberg is dressed like this? When you see Elon Musk, is it a mark of? Is it a kind of industry identity or something?
Well, I think it's cultural. We don't want to be encumbered by the ties and the suits, and then because most times we get our hands dirty, and so we just don't want to. We're not bankers. We are not lawyers, so we want to actually have that identity for ourselves, just like we're talking about.
All right, no, so let's get to the meat of the matter. Thanks for that particular clarification. And how has the growth of the internet, led to more online identity thefts? What are we doing wrong, really?
We're not doing anything wrong. It's just a matter of the space really. It's virtual, and you see when something is virtual, you can have unlimited capacity to commit any kind of thing you want to do, and then it's also anonymous to a reasonable extent. And the thing with, unlike the physical world, when you have the physical world, if I come in here and I steal this phone, for instance, you will know that it is missing. So the thing is, you're going to be more proactive, you're going to safeguard it a little bit more, and then you probably put a lot more security in place. But online is a bit different, because if you have a piece of information or a piece of document online and I have access to it, you also still have access to it, but you do not know that I have access to it. So that is why it is a bit more, we have to be a bit more stringent in how we, protect our data, how we protect our assets online. Because if I steal somebody's document, if I steal somebody's identity, for instance, the person is none the wiser to know that it had actually been stolen. So that's why, that is a little bit more, wider, the scope is wider online as opposed to in the physical world.
Given how frequent people interact on the internet these days and a lot of things that you have to do on the internet, what are the ways in which you can expose yourself to the activities of cyber hackers?
Right now, everything is online, everything is social media. We broadcast everything, we say our stories everywhere, we connect every time. So inadvertently, we are also sort of partaking in that activity. So sometimes you find out that even the hackers, the bad guys who are doing these things are also being creative. So sometimes, for instance, because they know that by nature, we're like, for instance, if you have your phone and you get somewhere and you see like something like a free Wi-Fi and then you connect to it, sometimes to you, yes, you're connecting, and as soon as you connect, what do? You start to probably check your email, you start to check your bank, transfers and all that, not knowing that sometimes some of these things we're connecting to were purposely set up by these guys to extract, information without you actually knowing. So those are the ways we expose ourselves. Some of the times when we go online and we put some of these things online, some of these, social media now has something called location tagging. So you tag your location. So as you're doing that, what you are sending is you're sending a message to people that you are at this particular location at this particular time, and whatever they want to do, they are perfectly capable of doing it. And then if you look at the financial services sector, sometimes because of the technology that is being used, we all have the last session you're talking about, paying with cards and paying with POS. Sometimes when these things don't work, you find out situations where when you go to like an ATM and it's not working and somebody comes to assist you, without you asking whether the person is necessarily from, your financial institution or not. The person asks you for your PIN, and you end up giving the person those details. You have compromised, yourself inadvertently. So those are the ways by which we expose ourselves to some of these things willingly and sometimes unwillingly.
All right, I will ask these questions with the fear of you sounding a bit technical. Please try not to be as techy. Now, what are the different modes of an online theft? I hear something like phishing and malware and so on. So for the sake of those who are not there, what are these modes? Maybe
so majority of these things happen through social engineering. By nature, we're and the way the economy is, everybody is looking for one thing or the other. So right now, I know that the economy is hard, so most people are looking for jobs. So it's easy for me to pretend as, a job board or like an HR, and then I send out emails, with links to, say, a form where you'd fill online. Now, in that form, because I know that you're desperate, we take advantage of the desperation of people. You start, and then I ask you, put in your name, put in your card number. But because you're also desperate, you're putting in all this information, not knowing that the information you're putting in, you're actually sending those details to a hacker or somebody who's going to use it for nefarious activities. So that's by way of social engineering. Then you have phishing. Phishing is just a way to mimic an organization that you already know. So I can pretend to be your bank, for instance. I can pretend to be, your telco provider, where I now ask you for, and then the way they do it, it's a sounding board. So some of the tricks they use. So for instance, we've seen situations where, say, probably around 5-6 p.m. on a Friday, someone sends you, a text message or calls you and says, the weekend is coming, your card is being blocked, you may not be able to spend money, you need to do this, we're going to send you a code now. Once you send the code, you give it back to us, and then that way they take advantage of that scenario. And of course, it's a game of numbers. If you try this with 1 million people, even if 1% of those people respond to you, that's 10,000, you have access to that. And then sometimes they don't even use that information immediately. They use it maybe a week after, 2 weeks after you must have forgotten that you actually sent them this information. So it's a lot of, tricks in the bags. Another thing that we've seen is this, like, when we're younger, there used to be people called pickpockets. When you're at the bus stop, they want to pick your pockets, like a fine man in suit, so you have your wallet. Now, one of the first things they train themselves on is, if I want to pick your pocket, I don't know where your wallet is. I don't know if it's in your suit pocket, in your back pocket, and you are staying at the bus stop, and I want you to get you to tell me without you telling me. So what they can come is, somebody can come, starting at the bus stop, you can just come and run and say, please beware of pickpockets. Oh, what do? You just
become security conscious.
You have told me without telling me that this is where, so I know that. So that's what phishing is as well. So it's deception through, you revealing to me. Yes.
Now, for some of these hackers, some hack into the database of some organizations, but these organizations that warehouse information of other persons, how can they protect the information from the hackers having access to them?
Well, I think the organizations are actually doing a good job right now. Back then, it used to be, a lot worse. Now, they need to protect the data. So they are using, some of the advanced security to actually protect, the web applications and then the data. Now, one of the things I also want us to quickly clarify is the difference between, hacking, cybercrime, and then fraud. Now, what we see mostly in that scenario is fraud, where somebody who is supposed to actually have legitimate access to the system is also using that to defraud the organization. Now, in terms of that, you can actually put, of course, that has to do with KYC, knowing the person you are employing, letting them go through, the trainings, and then letting them know that the consequences of what they do. Now, but in terms of somebody hacking from outside, those are really reducing, except of course there is collusion in the system. So those are the things that we're seeing in the industry. So they are using things like encryption to encrypt the data that is actually stored, so that even if you have access to that data, you are not able to read the contents of that data. And then if you look at the industry now, whether you're talking about the financial services sector or the telcos, there are regulatory bodies, like the central bank, who is telling them that, look, you have to implement some of these international information security standards to protect data in transit, data at rest, data in use, so that way even somebody who has access to it is not able to read your data.
Okay, in all of these protective measures, okay, regulation plays a role. The law plays a role. Do we have enough regulations to, to help organizations protect people's interest and identity, or do we need new rules?
Well, we actually have. One thing is the regulation and the policy, and the other thing is the implementation and the execution of those policies. And you see, the way technology is, it changes every single day. So you're almost always, just playing catch up. The regulation is there, and I know that, the regulatory bodies have issued some of these, and they keep issuing, and of course they even fine some of these organizations for not protecting. There's also even the data Nigeria Data Protection Regulation as well, and then the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau that is enforcing some of these regulations and making sure that organizations that are Nigerian organizations, whether you're a big company or you're a small company, so the regulation is there, but sometimes implementation. And then we also see that capacity building, because sometimes it's not easy. A lot of these things, like you said, are very technical. You have to be able to protect, from different angles. So training needs to also be carried out by some of these organizations, and of course, a lot of these things cost money as well.
So it's almost like there are no sure ways to ensure that your identity is not stolen. But when it does happen, what do you do? When we watched the report, we saw a lady talking about her account being hacked, and her husband did something. She doesn't know what the husband did to rectify the situation. What are the ways to handle it when you discover that your identity has been stolen or your account has been hacked?
Well, one of the first ways to do it is just to stop, to quickly report it to, you see, the way identities are stolen it's not physical. It's more if someone steals your driver's license, for instance, or your passport, you immediately know. So you can report, and then you cancel whatever visa or whatever is there and then. But in online world, sometimes you actually may not know, and sometimes if somebody has password to your email now, and as you're checking your email, the person is also checking it. There's absolutely no way, maybe the person even sends out an email as you and deletes the sent items, or has access to your social media and is also checking. If you notice online now, with a lot of these celebrities, you see that sometimes the only way you know sometimes is when the hacker now starts to use it for nefarious acts. So the first thing you do, especially online, is change all your passwords, and then enable multi-factor authentication. There is no reason why anybody online now should not be using multi-factor authentication. That is, after your username and password, you now have another level where, to gain access. So even if somebody were to compromise, your first level, they're not able to compromise, your second level. So those are the ways by which you can actually quickly rectify, the problem. Change those passwords, and then don't use one password for every, email, social media, bank, and all that. Make sure that those passwords are also different. And another thing we see that a lot of people do is that they store this because it's something that you need to know. Your password, you have to always remember. Probably you're logging into 10 or 20 online accounts every day. Most of them store a lot of these things on their phones. So sometimes if one of the things I do when I pick up somebody's phone is on their contact list, I just search for password or PIN or something. You find out that somebody is storing password as password or contact password. So, and once you have one person's password, especially your email is almost as if it's your identity online, because that's the way you actually communicate. So if somebody has access to that one email, they're able to compromise everything. So those are the ways by which you can safeguard yourself online.
All right, there is a myth I would like you to burst here. When we talk about cybersecurity, the discussion is often domiciled in industries and businesses. But you and I know that even for individuals, there are basic cybersecurity conversations that we must have. Please clarify, is it really an industrial lingo or something all of us should relate to? And please explain.
It is, we all have to relate with it personally, because we all carry devices about. The mobile phone that we carry every day is almost equivalent to the computer system of like 10 years ago. The capacity, it's almost like we're all carrying computers, in our pockets. So we all have to secure. I don't think anybody has a phone now that is just open. You have to put a password, you have to put, to lock it, you have to secure, because it houses essentially everything. You have your banking app, you have your, your social media apps, you have your email, so it has to be something that we are discussing every day on so it's not an industrial thing. It's something that even, cleaners, even, security men should actually be discussing, because at the end of the day, if somebody steals your identity and uses it they're not going to arrest the person who stole the identity. They're going to come and meet you because your identity is like somebody stealing your NIN or your BVN. That is what ties into you, and you're going to face the music for it.
Okay, we'll continue the discussion after this break. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. We're still looking at identity security and theft, and we still have Oluseyi, who is the CTO of Digital Encode, here with us. Now, for online sites that we go to, sometimes people are just surfing the internet and then you go to different sites, you click here, you click there. What are the do's and don'ts? What are the things to watch out for while you do that?
Now, make sure that what you're clicking on is you are active in clicking on it. So if you're used to going to a particular site, don't click on a link that somebody has sent to you. Click on, so one of the things you should be using is bookmarks. So if you're used to, visiting your bank, visiting your university, bookmark them such that every time you want to visit those sites, you go to the bookmarks that you have made. Now, the advantage that is, you see, if we don't participate in what the hackers are doing, they will not have access. They use tricks that and a lot of it is psychological. So if, for instance, now you have not participated in a promo of maybe a telco, and then you receive a text message, oh, you have won, because your number ends with something 8 or 9, you have won this prize from this and then they now send you a link that, but for you to claim this price, you need to click on this link and fill these details. Now, the truth is, if I send this out to 1 million people, I am sure that, 1,000, 2,000 will click on the link, and then if I'm asking them to fill in their name, their number, their phone number, their email, their this, they will gladly fill it in. Those are the things that you should not do. Don't, if you have not taken part in any promo, don't. So they use that psychological trick, and then they give you that emergency consciousness so that you quickly do it, and then they have access to these things. So you must not click on any link that is not yours. Secondly, on any of the devices that you are using, make sure you have, the first thing you should install when you get a new phone or a new computer or whatever is to install an antivirus, a malware scanner. So that, because a lot of these things too, they use, malware and viruses to, spread them. So once you do that, and then make sure that you regularly update your operating system, your iOS, your Android, whatever it is, make sure you regularly update them. And don't download apps that you are not sure of the source. Sometimes another thing we see is that they clone apps, so they mimic apps and then they disguise it so that when you download those apps, they ask you for these details. So those tricks are what they use. Make sure that you're not falling for them.
All right, there is this unguardedness that exists online. You are trying to maybe access a site and they need your email address to to be able to access that site, and you fill in the field email address. They now ask for password. The password there is not intended to be your email password. You are meant to create a password for that particular site. But what many people have done over the years is, okay, they input the password to their own personal email addresses and they get, hacked easily like that. Could you please speak more to things like this? So, because you may not be able to read between the fine prints, in between the lines, if you're not, tech savvy. I just used one example. There are one or two more that you would speak to?
Awareness is what is needed in that case, and which is why I like, a topic like this and a program like this, because it brings consciousness to it. Cybersecurity is not often spoken about a lot. It's often disguised as some kind of mystique where, it's only left for people that are intellectually, If it is discussed, people will know that when you are filling a form, every website is different, So when they ask you for your email, that is your identity. So put in your email. They're not necessarily asking you to put in your password, into it. Now, what you can use to safeguard that is to use second factor authentication. Now, even if you've put the password of your email into that field, if you have a second factor, what is a second factor? A second factor simply means that something other than what you know, which in most cases is probably what you are or what you have. So in that case, you may actually have like a token that, sometimes when you're logging into your email account, it prompts you to, put in a token that you generate on your phone. So if you do that, except the person has access to that phone, and that token, they're not going to be able to log in. So that's what we always tell people. Always enable second factor authentication on any website that you go into. And sometimes when you are creating new accounts on new websites, you have to generate new passwords, which is also the problem, because people are now generating so many passwords
that
you forget. And then because you're going to forget, you now have to write it down. And when you write it down, you now those are the issues, which is why the general industry right now is moving towards something they call passwordless authentication. So that sometimes when you want to log in, I don't know if you've used some websites where you just put in your email, they don't even ask you for password. They now send you a link to that email where you now go into your email and you click on that link. Definitely. So you don't have to remember your password.
So it has to be controlled from your email.
Exactly. So you only have to remember your email password and authentication so that you can click on that link.
Still talking about apps, you know that some apps will ask for permissions, and these permissions will allow them access to your device, to your files and everything. Without you allowing the permissions, you can't use the apps. What's the way to go about that?
Well, one of the things you have to do is you have to just trust in that, because for an app to be accepted into the App Store, it must have gone through, the vetting process of either Google or Apple, and they will have checked any app that isn't meeting the stringent requirements of those people. They would not allow it in. So one of the things that, of course, if they're asking you, and you know that you can't for instance, if you are using an app that needs to use your camera, for instance, you have to allow it. Otherwise, you know, like Zoom, maybe an app that we all use to communicate online, it will ask you for your mic, to access your mic. Otherwise, you speak and the person will not be able to hear you. So you just have to trust in the process of that thing. And then the other thing is, don't download apps that you are not sure of the source. You have to also be sure of the source before you download those apps. So those are the only two ways by which you can control, you know, access to those things.
Okay, let's speak about cloud computing and the inherent threats there. We live in a world now where they say we should go as virtual as we can. But what we call cloud is somebody's computer somewhere. Somebody's hard drive somewhere archiving all those information and data we are you know, domiciling with them. How much of a threat is cloud computing when we talk about, you know, identity theft?
I think cloud computing is probably even one of the most secure.
Really?
Yes, because if you look at the providers of cloud computing, these are international, you know, organizations. And of course, even here we have, like, the regulation says that our data, if you're going to be doing cloud, has to be resident here. So they implement things like encryption. They implement things like cryptography that actually allows you to secure the data. So even if someone were to access that the server, they would not see the information because it is actually encrypted on disk. Now, where you have to be careful is, you know, in information security, there is what is called securing data at rest, which is on the cloud, on the hard drive that you said. Okay. Then securing data in transit. So as you are putting in your username and password and you are sending it to the cloud, before it gets to the cloud, there are people they call man in the middle that they want to intercept, which is why at the beginning I said, yes, which is why I said don't have access to any, like you don't go to the airport and connect to the Wi-Fi in the airport, because you don't know, so many millions of people are also connecting and you don't know who is who. In fact, sometimes some people actually purposely set up their access point on their phones and allow you to connect through them, so that as you're sending in that thing, you're sending it through their phone before it gets to the cloud. So they log in, you know, your data. Now, lastly, always make sure that when you are sending your information, use HTTPS. There's always a padlock on the browser. Make sure that any website that is asking you for your details,
you have that padlock.
If it doesn't, please do not put in your details. It is a mandatory, you know, cybersecurity standard now for if you're collecting data or information from it must go. That S simply means is you are sending it securely across, you know, the internet. So nobody would, even if it was hacked, nobody will be able to see that data that you're sending.
Okay. Now, tracking some of these things, how easy and possible is it? Because when people's identity are stolen, and even when they report it or maybe crime has been committed, how possible is it to track the activities and know, oh, it was stolen by these people? Because everything is connected on the internet. The person who's stealing and using it is also carrying out the activities on the internet.
Well, yes. Tracking is actually supposed to be easy, but it's not just technical, you know. Every device online has what is called an IP address. So you can actually trace every communication back to an IP address. Now, but the problem is, again, data protection. It's a bit like if somebody has stolen money from your bank account and he's moved it to another bank account. You see, the bank is not at liberty to tell you what account that money was moved into, unless you go and get a police report. So the same thing with the IP address. So even if you trace, you know, say an IP address to a telco, you can't just go and tell the, you know, telco or the ISP to say, oh, so person on this IP address stole my data. You have to follow, you know, and sometimes these things can take due process. Another thing I want to talk about is even the training and awareness of law enforcement agents. Some of them are not well trained enough to actually even know, you know, the kind of data information to ask for when tracking is being done, which is in cybersecurity we call digital forensics. So they need to also be well trained, and then let the telcos know that, or the ISPs know that, if we're doing an investigation and we find out that somebody has been hacked from this IP address, you must be able to give us details of who who you allocated that IP address to. It's like a phone number. If somebody calls you on a phone and defrauds you, you have the phone number of the person. You can use that phone number to track the person. But the truth is, you can't do it by yourself. You need to take the phone number to the telco. They now need to tell you who they allocated that phone number to, because they have the data, they have the address, they have the name, they have the... So that's how you can actually, and then you also have to get the police and the law enforcement agents involved to be able to do a holistic, kind of tracking. So it's a whole gamut of people that you need to get involved to actually do tracking, which is why tracking is very, very difficult. Unlike in advanced countries where as soon as, processes are in place, as soon as they get your IP address, they are already taking your IP address to the ISP. ISP is giving them information. They can track you down even if you are staying in Timbuktu. They will come and meet you there because they have those details.
Okay, I like the fact that you mentioned, training for law enforcement agencies or officers or those who are part of that cyber security ecosystem. Now, when you're trying to track a stolen identity, it's more of a reactive, exercise. Let's talk about something being proactive now. How do we, at the industrial level, get a bit more proactive? Training is one of them. If you train your workforce, they know what to do. What more thing can we do apart from training of the workforce to show that we are really, proactive in, fending off hackers?
Well, like
industry level, not personal level now.
Yes, I think it's again through regulation, which is what data protection is also giving that look. You have to sanction people. So if, for instance, tomorrow you wake up and you find out that maybe you are receiving all these spam SMS messages, how did your number get out? So you have to start to sanction people. When you start to put sanctions on, which is why in the US and advanced countries, cybersecurity is a big thing. In fact, if you pay all the revenue you made in 1 year as fine for a cybersecurity, you will be more protective of, So at that level, you have to sanction people, you have to fine people, and people have to actually atone for these things. People go to jail for even, data, and it affects the bottom line. Sometimes they're even suspended from the companies that let this data out. They're even suspended from, their stock exchange and what have you. So that is why they're taking, and then it has to be, cybersecurity has to be from the top down. Okay. It's not something that,
bottom up.
Yes, it has to be from the top, from the board of directors, to the MDs and to the CEOs, and it has to be something that as they are discussing, revenues and logistics and all that, they have to actually have a plan, for cybersecurity and data protection.
Now, in curbing the crime, do you think that people are not doing enough in terms of reporting this crime? When someone has suffered from maybe a hack or identity being stolen, do you think people are not actually reporting this incident so that the authorities can look more into them?
Yes, you are very correct. People are not reporting because at the end of the day, if somebody's identity, if you steal somebody's identity, they don't report it because obviously a lot of these things are, they don't lend themselves to, your customer wouldn't want to know that, you've had a cybersecurity incident, is going to lead to loss of, confidence and all that. So a lot of people try to protect it. Now, with the regulation again that says, look, if you have suffered any kind of attack, any kind of hack, if identities have been stolen, you need to come forward and report it and let people know that, my database was hacked and people made away with so. But this is what we're doing but of course, that is going to lead to loss of confidence in those organizations. So that's why a lot of people, don't report it. But with the regulation, and you say a lot of these things are, as we go through the process, little by little, we'll get there eventually where cybersecurity will become something that people will come on TV and say, my organization was hacked and this data was lost and this is what we're doing to recover, the data.
Okay. In warfare, it is said that it is easy to fight the enemy without as against the enemy within. I want to assume in the cybersecurity world, it is the same thing. How do you identify the mole within your own, system, not the enemy without this time around? How do you identify them and tackle such?
That's a beautiful, fantastic question, which is what we've seen a lot in the industry. It's that enemy within, because that's even more difficult because this person is operating with the full knowledge of, your systems and all that. And yes, that has to do with, it's not even technical, that has to do more with the way organizations and the way people are recruiting. You know, one of the things you will see is when you go to especially some of these big organizations, you find out that somebody who is supposed to be maybe in marketing or sales is reading a book on hacking. Why are you reading a book on hacking and is working in a remote branch? You know, so those are the things that you have to regulate and to know, you know, process. Like, why do you want to know about hacking as a marketer? Do you want to hack the organization? Some of them will say, oh, they're doing it to advance. And then another thing we've seen now with this is with this jackpot syndrome, like people who used to work here before, you know, who have access to the system, when they leave and they, you know, go to another country, because they still have access, they still maintain access to the system, they can remotely log in and affect the system. So another, what organizations should put in place is, you know, a way to ease out, a way to, you know, disable some of the accounts that they create for these people, you know, as they are, you know, leaving the organization. Let them not open it to you know, to the public. And then monitor, put things in place to monitor, maker checker. If you're not, you know, you need to have access on a need to know basis. If I don't need to have access to, you know, like, if I only need to have access to read only, I should have access to read only. If I need to have access to read and write, I need to have access to read. But you see, most times, especially when there are issues in these organizations, they just relax some of these rules just so that you can do your job. And then when you have finished that thing, they don't, you know, they don't secure that system, you know, any longer. They just forget, and somebody who's supposed to have read access now has read write, and then uses it and then makes away with, you know, data.
Before we go, when you were talking about a marketer, for instance, reading a book on hacking, these days we have different courses. We even have people studying ethical hacking.
Yes.
What is that? And is there a danger in having ethical hackers?
No. Well, ethical hackers are, like the name says, they learn the art of hacking, but they use it to actually help the organization in securing. So what they do is you call them in to come and, you know, give you a hacker's viewpoint of, you know, and they always say, it's a white man that's written that made the pencil, that also made the eraser. So if you're able to hack an organization, then you can more adequately tell us how to protect ourselves. So if I've used, you know, a certain technique to hack you, then I can tell you, oh, this is where you need to protect your data, this is where you need to protect access, this is where you need to, so that way you have a lot more security. But of course, even for you to become an ethical hacker, you need their steps, their directions that you need. You know, it's not just for
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Olusheyi Akindende, the CTO of Digital Encode. You've actually educated a lot of us. If I didn't note anything, at least I would still remember that cybersecurity is a war all of us must fight. Whether you are a 17-year-old or you're a 70-year-old, it is not a personal warfare, it is a collective warfare. All right, thank you very much. So we'll go on a very short break now. We are not done with ICT, yes. We're not done with security online yet. But after this short break, we'll come back and talk about online child protection. And that is very key. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
We're living in a period where the rapid and transformative technologies have affected every aspect of our lives and society. That includes our exposure to online content. There are definitely the good, the bad, and not too pleasant takeaways from interacting with online content. As adults, a great deal of us can protect ourselves from the unsavory side effects that come from the overexposure to these myriads of information. But who steps in to protect the children from the hypnotic effect of overindulgence on the online content? A great deal of learning, interaction, creativity, and even digital literacy go on online, and children need to keep abreast of these developments as they learn to contribute to conversations and catch up with the trends in the online space. But what about the downsides? Cyberbullying, invasion of privacy, online predators, and others are there to give concerned parents a course to take a second look at the safety of their children or words online. Governments world over keep making and adopting policies like the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, General Data Protection Regulation, Digital Economy Act, and others. In spite of these, many children sadly still fall victims. Keeping children safe online should not be the sole responsibility of governments. Parents, educators, and tech companies would all have to be involved in protecting these children from the dangers of predators and those who feast on the naivety of these precious kids. You can start by paying a little more attention to what content your children consume on the internet. Yes, it begins with you. Juvi Ofiene, Suk News.
Picking up from the last line of that report, of course, it begins with you when it comes to child online protection. In 2021, an estimated 29.3 million, there were an estimated 29.3 million reports of suspected child sexual exploitation. So that should let you know that it is a very serious issue. These days, we have a lot of parents buying gadgets for their children, some for academic purposes, to carry out research, do schoolwork, and we even have online schooling for a lot of children. But do you know what your child is doing online, how they are interacting on the internet? So we will be looking at child online protection at this time. Now, I talked about parents buying gadgets for their children, some for academic purposes. Some is just for them to play with because of games. You have iPads that children play games with. And some online predators use this platforms, social media platforms, gaming platforms, chat rooms, to connect with the children. Some children have different social media accounts that they're very active on. What is the way to go in checking their activities?
As a parent, really, most times I feel alarmed. I feel, should I say I feel scared? Because you may not be there 24, you can't even be there 24 hours physically to protect your children online. These are people who are at a point in their lives when they take everything literal. The kind of things children do online when they're not being supervised or where there are no checks and balances for or some kind of regulation for what they do online will amaze you, will shock you as a parent. Just look at the statistics you just read out at the beginning of this particular segment. It's scary. Now, you will expect a parent to step into the picture, fill the gap for his children, but then how much of online literacy do parents themselves know? You can't give what you don't have, like they say. You can't. It is out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. That is what we all know. So most parents are still busy every day trying to make ends meet. The same parents would have to feed these children, pay their school fees. At what point do you have, to monitor them? And now there's a particular question. Do you exclude your children from the online network or community? That's a no, because they'll be left out. So these are issues for us as parents, essentially.
Okay, even as it is an issue for parents, but I know that the government too has a role to play. And there are some countries that certain sites, you can't have access to certain sites in that country because they are also trying to protect their children. Shouldn't we also be looking at that? Because if it's a free-for-all environment, as long as you have access to an internet-enabled device, then you can connect to any site. Isn't that dangerous?
No, it is dangerous. I do know that governments at all levels are trying as much as possible to ensure that we create age-appropriate content, either online or offline. And that is why even movies are rated. You see, this one is 16, this one is 14, this one is, 18, and so on and so forth. But beyond, government regulation, because the government can only set the laws, we are the ones who will implement the laws. We are the ones who will watch over these kids. Now, I think as a people, especially as content creators, we should also be very conscious of these things. The kind of content that some creators, go into, all in the name of making, money and generating traction, is appalling. Of course, though, let's just log on to our guest, who is an expert that will speak on it. We have standing by via Zoom, Idowu Akinde, the CEO of Bullion Labs, managing partner at Bullion Capital. And the person will be speaking to us about child online protection. Good morning, Ido. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, good to have you on the show. We're looking at protecting our children online. Now, for starters, can you, help us establish how children should be properly introduced to the online world while still keeping them safe? What should we do as preps before they go online?
Okay, so thank you. This is a very important topic, not just for me personally, but for the community. I think that the root cause of incidents that breach children's safety online is the role, or rather the mindset of parents and the role of parenting in modern society. Unlike previous generations, including our parents' generations, in this current generation, it is not strange to have situations where much of what our parents called parenting, we today outsource a great portion of it to either other third parties like, helps, maids, assistants, and in some cases, technology. So that's actually the root cause. The root cause is that the modern society, modern life, a technology-driven modern life, and the fast-paced modern life, which requires both parents to be active breadwinners, creates a situation where there is no way that our children will not be exposed to technology. Therefore, it's more of a roll with the punches, manage the situation type thing than take all devices away from, than a drastic take all devices away from them and restrict their access to devices, to technology, because they live in a technology world. In fact, we in the technology world call this new generation, we call them digital natives, because they were born from the moment they opened their eyes. The world they opened their eyes into is a deeply technology world. Unlike you and I, that will still remember a time when, in order to access the internet, we needed to go through something called a dial-up modem that would do. So we are not exactly technology natives, but they are technology natives. So technology is embedded deeply into their world. There are a couple of principles that the UNICEF, okay, recommends for child safety, online child safety. And the foundation of these things goes back to a more deliberate, proactive approach to our children's parenting as a whole, and including but not limited to our children's interactions with technology as a component of that parenting big package. Okay, so the first of those things is setting clear ground rules. As simple as it sounds, the big problem is that when you enter a lot of modern homes where you have a child, you actually find that that child has a device, sometimes a phone, sometimes a tablet, that they are just staring at. And sometimes throughout the length of your stay in that person's house, could be your cousin, could be your sister, could be anybody, could be a friend, throughout the length of your stay in that person's house, that child is literally fixated on that device. That has a lot of that has a lot of demerits, okay? Even beyond online safety, it has attention span issues, it has concentration issues, it has a lot of problems that it creates in the child's life. But let's focus on online safety. The number one principle that the UNICEF espouses, there are 4 of them, is that parents should reevaluate how they are approaching parenting. And as the first principle, consider setting clear ground rules that define a healthy, respectful, probably fun and interactive approach to devices.
So once that is done, once the ground rules have been set, which I would need you to also talk on, or maybe give an example of some of the ground rules, what are the digital skills that parents should teach their children so they know how to navigate the online space?
Thank you very much for that question. Riding on your question, in order to survive the 21st century world, actually, we will die out and leave them in this world, right? They even need the digital skills that we possess today more than we do, because, like I said before, they are digital natives. So, number one, the classic skills, the classic digital skills of things like word processing, the ability to use, packages like Microsoft Office, word processing, Excel for spreadsheets and data analysis, things like presentation design with PowerPoint. Those are basic. Then you want to move to what we are using right now. We're using Zoom right now. And everybody that is an adult today, in fact, students in universities today, are already familiar with the use of Zoom. We also need to teach them how to use Zoom. So as much as I said ground rules earlier on, I was still going to go into the phase of, which is the third principle, right? The third principle is to actually deliberately set up positive technology interactions with your children. So you can deliberately set up a Zoom meeting sometimes from your office, right, with your child, just to help them practice and model what a positive online experience looks like. Maybe you're at the office and you want to talk with them, you don't want to use the telephone, set up a Zoom call, okay, and let them practice it. They're going to use these things in their primary and secondary schools, and they're going to use them during their holidays. They're going to use them when they go to university, and so on and so forth. So you might as well start to embed it. So if you notice, I started by saying the approach is not to create a drastic 100% removal or abstinence from technology. It's actually to help them navigate, to kind of hold them by the hands and show them how to use technology positively. So I started by saying, what are the digital skills in answer to your question? First is those basic word processing, data analysis, and presentation design. Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint. Those are classic, okay? And those are very important. On top of that, you want to layer something like collaboration tools like Zoom, Google Meet, and stuff, okay? And then on top of that, you want to make sure that your children have some type. I'm a programmer myself. I'm a technology coach myself. So I cannot pass up this opportunity to introduce the new literacy of the future, which is programming. Okay, so your children should at least have some experience with programming, okay, with computer programming. This can be another topic that we can discuss another day entirely, because computer programs of nowadays do not have to be that cryptic language that you and I learned or our friends learned in university. C#, Visual Basic, Python, da. There are now computer programming languages that are entirely visual and are like games. You just drop Lego blocks, like building blocks, and by the time you are done with your building blocks, the program will convert your building blocks to a program. What that does is it teaches everybody critical thinking skills and problem solving skills. So it's not the child may be a lawyer. The child may grow up to be a lawyer or a doctor or an aeroplane pilot. They don't need to grow into a career in full-time programming, but the programming using those kinds of Lego building blocks languages teaches them how to think logically and how to solve problems.
All right.
Am I still good?
Let me take you back to the ground rules that my colleague was trying to, exact from you. You did mention a point which is very crucial. Children seem addicted to technology. Like you said, if you are there for 3 hours, 4 hours, they may be there focusing on it. How should we as parents regulate this? Because if you can prevent online addiction, it's a big step towards keeping them safe online. Is there a number of hours we must say, okay, this is how long you can stay? Do we have international provisions for that? Or what can we do to correct that addiction?
Okay, thank you very much for that, sir. I don't know, so I can't say, for sure whether there is a set number of hours per day that is recommended by international organizations. But I'll tell you what I have used for me that works. I have found, right, that the way to get children of nowadays, mine and those of my, siblings and friends and colleagues, to do what you want them to do is to approach them from a negotiating stance. Okay, this is my parenting style, if I may be open okay. So I am that person, okay, and somebody else may have a different approach. I am that person that actually will help the child understand and say, do you know that if you spend 3 hours per day in front of any digital screen, total screen time per day, TV plus tablet plus phone plus extra, it is going to affect your ability to concentrate in class in the future. Meanwhile, you said you wanted to be a pilot, right? You said you wanted to be an astronaut, right? If you don't concentrate in class, you are not likely going to become XYZ. So what I'm doing is that I am avoiding the trap of, I'm setting ground rules, but I'm approaching it from the perspective of helping the child to see and visualize internally the different pathways of action and consequence, rather than, Babatunde, come here, drop that laptop now and don't touch that laptop again for the rest of today. Do you get that? So now, I'm not here to say that this is the only approach that works, but this is the approach that works for me. And so that's half of the answer to your question, the approach. What are the specific ground rules? For me, I believe that children should not have more than 1 hour 1 hour of close-up device time. When I say device time, that is a tablet or a phone, right? Every day. The reason is I have seen, okay, how anything more than that affects them, cognitively. And so what I've done again is that I introduce them to activities. Do you want to go downstairs and ride a bicycle? Do you want to draw or paint? In fact, we can get the drawings or the paintings and the steps to drawing the paintings from a laptop, and and then go on and print. So you get my point now. Which is why I started by saying the technology is a tool and an enabler for parenting. But what happens is that we get so overwhelmed by the demands of a technology-driven, fast-paced modern society that we unconsciously outsource parenting to the technology devices. So the onus is on the adults, not just the parents, every adult around a particular child, to help that child see that if I continue to spend 4 hours per day or 8 hours per day in some instances around technology devices, too much time around technology devices, the child needs to understand that they are jeopardizing their own dreams. If that kind of action and consequence mindset, if we can help our children imbibe that kind of action and consequence mindset, then we're actually making our own parenting job easier. Did I answer your question, sir?
All right, we'll continue with the conversation after this quick break. Please stay.
Can you hear me?
All right, thanks for staying tuned to Early Exchange. We're still looking at child online protection, and we have been talking with Ido Akinde, who is the CEO Bullying Labs. All right, now, before we went on the break, we were talking about the approach, how to set ground rules for children regarding online interaction. And Akinde mentioned that he would prefer that parenting be approached with a method of negotiation. That sounded a bit strange because in this part of the world, it's more of an instruction approach. Parents pass down instruction to children, and they're expected to obey the instruction. Oh, so Akinde, let's continue the conversation. So when parents, some parents cannot use the method of negotiation, and they cannot also be present with their children for most part of the day to maybe have them do other activities instead of spending so much time online or with gadgets. What are the ways to supervise? Some of them resort into supervising their activities of their children online once they return from work or from business. But to effectively supervise, you must know what you're supervising. What are the ways to supervise? What should parents check in order to know their children's online history, sites they've been to, things they've done online?
Okay, I'm not sure Akinde is there yet. Okay, so let me just speak to, I won't answer that question. Let me come back to the negotiation thing, essentially. Yeah. For a lot of African fathers, we need a complete mind shift. Because that is, yeah, it's the norm now. But
did you say fathers? Mothers inclusive?
Oh, let me speak to my constituency.
Oh, your gender,
fathers,
all right.
My gender, really. Now, the classic African father has his words as laws that can neither be queried nor varied by a child. But children these days are born negotiators. We all saw the mommy calm down video back then. Even here, when you want to spank a child, she is asking for a second chance. Daddy, please give me a second chance. And who are you not to give a fellow man a second chance here? But I think what what Ido Akinde said there is very, very profound. Because spanking has not really yielded as much, returns on investment, because it is an investment of energy on your own part. It has not yielded as much of returns on investment as we expected. The child who are spanked in this part of the world end up maybe still doing the same thing for which you are spanking them. Whereas in some other climes, those who were talked to politely, those who were negotiated with politely, they still end up, becoming responsible. The idea is I don't want to disappoint daddy. So I will not do what is wrong because I don't want to disappoint daddy because I fear daddy. And that is the takeout for me.
And you're also able to appeal to their reasoning. Imagine letting the child know the consequences of spending too much time online or with a gadget. That way, they're able to appreciate what you want to do. And so the rebellion doesn't come in. Because when you give instructions sometimes, they don't understand why you're giving the instructions. There is a tendency they want to rebel against that, whether openly or behind you. But when you make them understand that, oh, like the example he gave, you want to be a pilot, or you want to be a doctor. So if you spend too much time with devices, it will affect your attention span. You can't concentrate much in class, and so you may not be able to study to become what you want. So the child sees the bigger picture and says, oh, so I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a nurse, I want to be whatever profession that they want to be. So I need to study, I need to focus in class, so I need to do less of that. So I think it works. Yes. And then he also talked about outsourcing parenting. Yes, sometimes when we blame parents for not being there for their children, we also need to understand the economic challenges that parents are trying to live up to, trying to thrive in. Because some parents have to do multiple jobs, some have to work longer hours to be able to provide for their children. And so something has to keep the child busy. But I think parents need to be creative about this. It is not enough for you to just buy a device and say, okay, once they're back from school, they can be playing games online. Because we've seen now that some things that were trusted before, we should even give them a second look and a third look these days. Cartoons, what kinds of cartoons are they watching online? Are they being they've been exposed to violence in the cartoons? Are they being exposed to certain things that will corrupt their mindset? So these are the things that parents should also think about. Be creative about the activities that you allow your children participate in, rather than just hand them a device and then they would just be there with it. Whatever they do with it is none of your business. All right, welcome back, Akinde. Let's continue with the conversation. Now, you talked about approaching parenting